Welcome back to Master 79. Today we are doing a full Band 9 walkthrough of ielts speaking part 2 and part 3 on the topic describe a person you know who is from a different cultural background. We will plan the cue card in 60 seconds, build a 2-minute answer, then handle all 3 part 3 questions. One thing before we start, the model answer describes an invented person. Copy the technique, not the content, because an examiner can hear a memorized answer immediately. First, what actually happens? In part 2, the examiner hands you a cue card plus a pencil and paper. You get 1 minute to make notes, then you speak for 1 to 2 minutes, and the examiner will not interrupt you. That silence is the hard part. You have to fill the time yourself. Part 3 follows immediately. It lasts 4 to 5 minutes, and it is a discussion, not a story. The questions grow out of the same theme, but they become abstract, so you are dealing with opinions, causes, comparisons, and consequences. Here is the card, exactly as it is printed. 3 bullets to cover, plus a final instruction, and explain how you feel about him or her. 1 note on the wording. The source reads how you knew him or her. The usual examiner phrasing is how you got to know him or her. I have left it as printed, and the model answer covers both readings, so you are safe either way. So how do you use that 1 minute? Draw a grid with 4 boxes, 1 for each bullet on the card. Then fill it with nouns, not sentences, because you cannot write and think at the same time. 4 rules. Notes are for nouns. 1 person, 1 scene, 1 feeling, because depth beats coverage every time. Pick fast. A slightly worse person you can actually describe will always beat a perfect person you cannot. And save time for the final bullet. Explain how you feel, because that is where Band 9 is won. Most candidates rush it, and it is the only bullet that asks you to reflect rather than report. Box 1. Who she is. My candidate has invented a friend called Jaewoo, South Korean, early 30s, a user experience designer. Notice the notes are fragments. And notice one detail that is cultural rather than biographical. She is the eldest of 3, which carries a real weight of duty in her family. That single line does more work than a paragraph of description because it opens the door to culture without announcing it. Box 2. Where she is from. The upgrade here is precision. Anyone can say Korea, naming the city Daegu and adding that it is a fairly conservative city in the southeast immediately sounds like real knowledge of a real person. Then give the reason she is here, and one honest complication. She talks about home with both affection and frustration. Nuance like that reads as authentic. Box 3. How you got to know her. Tell 1 scene, not a history. A language exchange cafe on a Saturday morning. The accident of sharing a table. 3 hours of conversation. That is a scene the examiner can picture. Then show the friendship developing through concrete cultural things. Chuseok, the Korean Harvest Festival, eating from communal dishes, and her attempts to teach me honorifics. Specific nouns, every time. Box 4, and this is the one to protect. Do not just say I like her. Say what she changed. My candidate admits she thought she was open-minded and learned that being open-minded and being genuinely curious are 2 different things. Then the closing thought, the friendship never feels like a cultural exchange program, and the differences have turned out to be the least interesting thing about them. That is a reflection, not a report, and it lands the answer.
I'd like to talk about Jaewoo, the South Korean woman who has become one of my closest friends, even though on paper we couldn't have grown up more differently. She's in her early 30s and works as a user experience designer for a tech company that relocated her here about 4 years ago. She's originally from Daegu, a fairly conservative city in the southeast of Korea, and she's the eldest of three, which in her culture carries a real weight of responsibility that I hadn't appreciated until she explained it to me. We got to know each other completely by chance. I'd signed up for a language exchange cafe on Saturday mornings mainly to keep my English ticking over, and she happened to be sitting at my table. We ended up talking for 3 hours straight, and what struck me was how curious she was. She asked far better questions than I did. Since then, she's pulled me into her world in the best possible way. She's taught me to eat properly from communal dishes, she's dragged me to Chuseok celebrations with her colleagues, and she's tried, with limited success, to teach me Korean honorifics she insists. I call her Unni, which is what a younger woman calls an older sister. She also introduced me to a concept called Ninkai, roughly the art of reading a room without anybody saying anything. As for how I feel about her, I'm enormously fond of her and quite grateful to. Before we met, I'd have said I was open-minded, but she showed me that being open-minded and actually being curious about someone else's world are two very different things. What I value most is that our friendship never feels like a cultural exchange program. Most of the time, we're just two people complaining about work and arguing about films. The differences are there, but they've turned out to be the least interesting thing about us.
That is the complete answer on one screen. Pause here and read it as a whole, and watch how the 4 bullets are each signposted, then how the last paragraph stops reporting and starts reflecting. Word count and speaking time are on the screen, both measured, not estimated. Part 3 needs a different shape. 4 moves, and I call it PREC. Position, answer the actual question in 1 line. Reason, explain the mechanism, not just a restatement of your opinion. Example, 1 concrete instance, real or plausible. And counter, acknowledge the other side with a phrase like that said, then resolve it. That last move is what separates a good answer from a band 9 answer, because it shows you can hold 2 ideas at once instead of defending one. At the bottom of the screen you can see all 4 moves applied to the first part 3 question, 1 line each. That is the skeleton. Everything else is just fluency laid over the top of it. Question 1. Where and how can we get to know people of different cultures better? Notice the plan refuses the obvious answer. Instead of listing places, it names a mechanism. Shared activity beats a cultural agenda, and it pushes back on travel, which is the answer every other candidate gives.
I'd say the honest answer is that it happens best when there's a shared activity rather than a deliberate cultural agenda. Workplaces and universities do a lot of the heavy lifting, obviously, but the really productive settings are the ones where you're forced to cooperate on something: a sports team, a kitchen, a volunteering project. You end up learning about someone sideways, which is far less awkward than sitting down and interviewing them about their traditions. Travel gets a lot of credit here, and I'm slightly skeptical because a fortnightly resort teaches you almost nothing. If I had to pick one thing, I'd say learning even a bit of someone's language, because it signals effort and people open up to effort.
Question 2. Advantages and disadvantages of cultural diversity. This is an invitation to be balanced, so take it. 2 advantages, 2 disadvantages, and then, crucially, a resolution. The advantages are not automatic. Do not leave a 2-sided answer sitting on the fence. Land it.
On the plus side, the strongest argument is probably about problem solving. If everybody in a room has the same background, they tend to share the same blind spots, so mixed teams catch mistakes that homogeneous ones sail straight past. There's also the everyday enrichment: food, music, festivals, which is easy to dismiss as trivial, but genuinely makes cities more livable. The drawbacks are real, though, and pretending otherwise is unhelpful. Diversity can slow things down, because you can't rely on unspoken assumptions and you have to spend time actually explaining yourself. And if it's badly managed, people cluster into parallel communities and never really mix, which gives you the appearance of diversity without any of the benefits. So my view is that the advantages aren't automatic, they depend on whether institutions do the work of bringing people into genuine contact.
Question 3. How can traditional culture and other cultures coexist? Here the candidate does the most advanced thing available in part 3. She rejects the framing of the question. It is not a zero-sum contest. Then she concedes that coexistence still needs work and finishes on a sharp image.
I think the mistake is to frame it as a zero-sum contest, where every foreign influence costs you a piece of your heritage. Cultures have always borrowed from each other. What we call tradition is usually just borrowing that happened long enough ago that we've forgotten about it. That said, coexistence doesn't look after itself. It needs deliberate support, funding for languages and crafts that can't compete commercially, and teaching young people why tradition exists rather than simply insisting they observe it, because things survive when people understand them. The examples I find most convincing are the hybrid ones: a chef cooking her grandmother's recipes with local ingredients, or traditional music played on modern instruments. Purists hate it, but I'd argue that's exactly what a living tradition looks like. The alternative is preserving something in a museum, which is really just a dignified way of letting it die.
Here is the language bank. 6 groups. Take one phrase from each and use it this week out loud. Phrases you have said once are available under pressure. Phrases you have only read are not. Finally, why this counts as band 9. Fluency and coherence. It runs at length without visible effort. Each bullet is signposted, and every part 3 answer resolves instead of trailing off. Lexical resource precise. Idiomatic collocation used naturally rather than decoratively. Grammar a genuinely full range, including a third conditional. And pronunciation, which no script can demonstrate. One honest caveat, and it is on the screen too. Band 9 here is Beemaster 79's own assessment against the public ielts band descriptors. It is not a certified examiner score. Your turn, and this only works if you actually do it. Set a timer for 60 seconds and draw the grid for your own person. Then record yourself speaking for 2 minutes, and do not stop early, because learning to fill the silence is the whole skill. Then answer one part 3 question using all 4 PREC moves. Listen back once and note only 2 things: where you resolve and where you trailed off. Post your closing line in the comments and I will read everyone. This has been Beemaster 79. Good luck.